Well, joining us now is Greg Schleppenbach, the CEO of the Culture Project, and we'll talk more about that. But before that, he spent 6 years as the Associate Director of the Secretariat of Pro-Life Activities at the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. And then before that, 25 years at the Nebraska Catholic Conference as both the Pro-Life State Director and the Executive Director. So welcome back to Nebraska.
It's great to be here. I always love coming back to my home.
I have to ask you, you spent so many years in the trenches of Nebraska with Roe versus Wade in effect, and then of course the Dobbs decision came through, and we've seen mixed results, I guess, in elections across the country. But when you woke up after election night and looked at the results from Nebraska, what was that like for you, knowing that Nebraska's, at least to that extent, the only state that's been able to turn back the abortion industry to the extent that we did?
Yeah, well, obviously, very, very pleased and proud of my home state being one of three this cycle to resist the abortion movement and trying to enshrine abortion in state constitutions. I was really pleased. I stayed up to find out.
Okay.
I didn't have to wake up to find it out. I stayed up quite into the wee hours of the morning to see the election at a lot of different levels. But so I knew it was looking good by the time I went to bed. But yeah, I was really, really pleased to see that, and in Florida and South Dakota as well.
Why do you think that was able to happen in Nebraska and those other states as well, when so many other states before that, 7 I think, had struck out?
Well, I think there are a number of factors. I think that the states that have faced it this time learned a bit from the previous states that had gone through this battle. I think that's certainly a part of it. Nebraska obviously tried a very different approach in an alternative ballot measure. The state of Florida, they had to get to 2/3, 60%, which was a little higher bar. Came darn close, but I think the governor's very active campaigning against it was a decisive factor. South Dakota, from what I understand, there wasn't as much money and coordination of the pro-abortion side there. So I think there are a lot of different factors. I think also, to some degree, the potency of the abortion mindedness, the support of abortion in state initiatives subsided a little bit from the previous election cycle. So I think there are a lot of different factors.
So there was such jubilation when Roe versus Wade was overturned with the Dobbs decision. But now, as I mentioned, we've seen some losses in the states, and President-elect Trump has said that it's a state issue and it's not going to be a federal issue. Could it be that Dobbs ends up making it more difficult on the pro-life side than what we had even under Roe versus Wade?
No, I don't think so at all. I think having the ability at the state level to impact this is only going to be good in the long run. I think there was a lot of obvious fervor by the other side, and I think Dobbs caught a lot of people a little bit off guard. I think even in the pro-life movement, we didn't expect that case and that ruling quite as quickly as it happened. There was obvious hope and encouragement with the change of the Supreme Court, but I think there were a lot of people who thought this would be probably a couple different cases before they would ultimately get to overturning Roe. So in that sense, it caught, I think, everybody a little bit off guard, and I think it made it very easy for the pro-abortion side to say the sky is falling and whip their supporters into a frenzy that ultimately worked on their behalf in these state initiatives, and they were able to capitalize, I think, upon people's sort of surprised and in some cases fear that this was a total ban in every state, and so that created some inertia, I think, on their part that explains a good bit of the 7 states that previously we lost in terms of ballot initiatives.
So because you've for so long have had your finger on the pulse of the pro-life movement across the country, where do you find your hope? Where do you see this movement going in the future? What's the next battleground?
Well, I don't know that there's any particular new approach that has to happen, and this gets a little bit into my presentation tonight. Is I think as I thought about even here in Nebraska, what it might look like if we lose or win, and ultimately I think in terms of what we have to do moving forward, it doesn't change a whole lot. You know, we knew that this is a battle not just to make abortion illegal, it's a battle to make it unthinkable. We truly have to change the mindset of people, the culture at its root, to understand better the nature of the human person, and to be able to really get to that point where abortion's unthinkable and not merely illegal. That's going to be a very long-term project. That's going to have to look at a lot of different things and attack it at a lot of different angles. So I think that it is going to be really important for states to look at that, to look at what do we have to do to fundamentally change people's minds and hearts about this issue. So I think that it really is going to be, certainly we have to continue to do what we might call the blocking and the tackling of pro-life work, the things we've been doing for 50 years, the legislative, the educational, the pastoral. Obviously, prayer and fasting is critically important. I would say prayer and fasting is even more important. This is definitely one of those evils, these devils, that's only going to be expelled through prayer and fasting. We have got to do those kinds of things. I think something else that's really important, and when I was in the last couple of years that I was at the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, we developed the Walking with Moms in Need initiative in anticipation of this moment that, you know, if Roe were overturned, and it was like, okay, well, the church needs to do what the church does really well, and that is provide support structures for pregnant moms and families, and all the kinds of, addressing all the kinds of issues that often drive women to even think about, let alone go through an abortion. So I think certainly continuing and even doubling down on our efforts to make sure we have policies and programs and such in place to support pregnant moms. But I think we also have to, this goes to my own organization, and where my whole mindset has sort of shifted from fighting the supply side of abortion, the abortion industry, to not fighting, but addressing the demand side of abortion. Mm-hmm. And that means reaching young people earlier in their lives and getting them on the right path before the culture of death gets its grips on them and takes them down very dark and destructive paths. And the culture of death is reaching young people younger and younger and younger. The average age of a young person being exposed to pornography is 8 years old. And social media and all the different things that put very destructive, false, counterfeit images of what it means to be human, what love is, are very destructive. And so the movement, if there is a significant change, I think, it's that we've got to invest more in reaching and empowering and equipping young people to withstand this culture of death, which is overwhelming, and it's getting to them younger and younger. It used to be at the college level. Now it's at the junior high level that they are really getting dragged down into these dark and destructive places. So we have to be much more serious about investing in reaching young people and equipping them, inspiring them to be able to withstand the culture of death that they're going to be confronted by as they go even into later in the high school years and certainly in the collegiate years and beyond.
And you're talking about your work, your life's focus now with the Culture Project as CEO. So tell me a little bit more about specifically how do we do that? How do we address the culture and change it? I don't want to say back, because it's never going to go back to where it was, and maybe it shouldn't, but how do we change the thinking of the culture to one that is more pro-life instead of culture of death?
Yeah, well, what we do at the Culture Project is we've created a peer-to-peer kind of ministry of young people right out of college, 22 to 24 or 5 years old, who we form very intensely before they go into the dioceses that we serve and start speaking to middle school and high school students. So we're reaching out to our target audience is 7th through 12th grade students. And the three primary topics we speak to them on is human dignity, which is, really fundamentally who they are and what they're made for. So their identity as children of God, which is really foundational, that they understand that they have value simply because they are, not because of what they do, but simply the fact that they are human. That's really foundational. I think simply going in and having a pro-life presentation and explaining why abortion is wrong and the church's teaching on it, that's important, but it's even more important and foundational that they understand their identity as children of God, so they can spot those things that are incongruous with that dignity or violative of that dignity. So helping the young to understand, and let's face it, the young people today, there's a crisis of identity. And we need to be helping them to understand what it means to be a child of God and what it means to have value simply because they are, simply because they exist. So the human dignity, sexual integrity, helping them to, and this goes to, all of this goes to Pope St. John Paul II, whose entire life and pontificate was all around helping the young to see who they are as children of God. And investing in them with World Youth Day, in Evangelium Vitae, the Gospel of Life, talking about how it's an illusion to think we can build a true culture of life if we don't help the young to understand and appreciate authentic human sexuality and love as they were intended, as God intended them to be. So he clearly invested. He saw that there was a need to reach them younger because he saw decades ago what we see in disturbing reality today, all the ways in which the culture of death attack young people and get them on the wrong path. So helping them know who they are, helping them understand authentic love, and not just educating them on that. And this is again where the Culture Project is unique, is that we use enfleshed beings to do that. We're sort of the embodiment of Pope John Paul's teaching and pontificate, in that by training young people to be mentors, to be examples of virtue, to call these young people to live lives of virtue, is far more impacting than simply having somebody come in and give a presentation and then go away. So we invest in the students that we speak to. We go into dioceses for 5 years. And so we're going back to those schools and numerous times with our various talks, doing lunch encounters where we just hang out with the students, and opportunities for them to talk about in one-on-one or small group the topics that we address. So it's really investing in relationship, as well as helping them to see who they really are and be inspired in the truths and teachings of the church. So I think that kind of investment of mentorship, in addition to really getting these important concepts in front of young people earlier and earlier, is how we're going to change the culture.
And you mentioned virtue, and even your mission statement of the Culture Project talks about restoring the culture through the experience of virtue. Virtue isn't a word that we hear a lot these days. How are you finding that this generation reacts not just to the language of the word virtue, but to the actual concept of virtue?
Surprisingly, really, really well. Young people want substance, and they don't want things sugar-coated. I hear this all the time from the missionaries who interact them. They want to know the truth, and they want to know it in an unvarnished way. And they respond, again, not only to the content of what we do, but I think what makes them respond even more so is the missionaries. That these are people not much older to them that they can kind of look up to, who are striving to live this life, and so they're examples for these young people. And so it's not just teaching them about virtue; it's actually having individuals, real people who are trying to live that and share their own experience with these young people. And that really, I think, is the secret sauce. You've got to have both. You've got to have great content, but having young people that they can relate to, especially, who are conveying this, who are talking, who are sharing their lives with these young people and discipling them, is really key. And the young people respond to that. I think even more so than just simply defining what virtue is, or explaining the importance of living a life of virtue. The lived reality of these missionaries and their example is what is so compelling to young people.
And do you think that all that work that you put in for a couple of decades in Nebraska and then at the USCCB has led you to, is this your life's work? Has it led you here to where you are at the Culture Project?
Yeah, it really has. I couldn't have scripted this way, but there's so much in life that we could never possibly script, and God's plan is always, infinitely better than our own. I honestly, after 25 years here, which I loved, and then 6 years at the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops doing federal pro-life policy work, I especially working in D.C. and Congress and with policy, and which, you don't see a lot of progress. I was really at a point in my career where I was feeling very burned out, and really soul searching, like, where do you want me to go, Lord? This is what I've done my entire life, but I don't feel I've got the passion anymore to do this work. And then reconnecting with Christina Whalen, the founder of the Culture Project, and then ultimately coming to the Culture Project has been completely life-giving. I feel like I have the passion I had when I started as a 26-year-old working for the bishops of Nebraska. And it's for a number of reasons. One, because of the very hopeful mission, and to be able to do something that is actually going to make a difference. Where it didn't feel like that especially when I was working at the national level in D.C. Working with these splendid young people who are just giving all of themselves for the good of the young people that they speak to and interact with. And also, again, being able to work in a way that is addressing the demand side that is ultimately what we have to do if we're going to change the trajectory of our culture. How can you not be excited about that and passionate about that? And so it is. It's been revivifying in my life, in my career, in my work.
Yeah. So you're back in Nebraska to serve as the keynote speaker for the Nebraska Bishops Pro-Life Banquet. What's your message going to be? What's the takeaway from what you're going to deliver to the group there?
Yeah, really, in essence, three things. One, it's the message of our faith. We operate from victory, not just for victory, which is a message that has always been motivating to me and keeping me from getting discouraged. That's the beauty of our faith. Our Lord has defeated death once and for all, so we operate really from victory. Of course, the devil still exists and has to be resisted, and so, but knowing that the ultimate battle has been won, and what our Lord is looking for is persistence and fidelity, and giving all of what He's given us back to Him multiple times over is really what we're called to do, and everyone and anyone can do that. The second message is that what I mentioned earlier, our work is not simply to make abortion illegal, it's to make it unthinkable. And these two realities, as I refer to them, are the same whether we would have lost the ballot initiative or won the ballot initiative. And then the final message really is one where I speak directly to every person's heart and soul, that we will not experience the transition that we seek in our culture until we first seek transition in our own hearts. We can't give what we don't have, and each of us needs to attend to our own life and soul and response to God to make sure it is as vigorous as it needs to be. And then we'll see transformation in the culture when we see that transformation in our own hearts, and as we grow interiorly, we'll have more to give to those around us, which is ultimately what's going to turn this culture around.
Yeah. Greg Schleppenbach, welcome back to Nebraska. Thanks for all the work you did in Nebraska with the Nebraska Catholic Conference, and excited to see what lies ahead for you and for the Culture Project.
Thank you very much.